There's a fire starting technique that costs $0, works in rain, wind, snow, and freezing temperatures, and produces a reliable ember in under 30 seconds, using nothing but a tube of wood or metal and a small piece of plant fiber. No matches, no lighter fluid, no batteries, no branded survival kit. A technique so mechanically reliable that Special Forces survival training programs in multiple countries include it as a primary fire starting method for situations where conventional fire tools fail or are unavailable. Zero cost, 30 seconds, any weather condition. Fire from nothing but physics and preparation. The global outdoor survival gear industry generates over $2 billion annually from the sale of fire starting tools, lighters, waterproof matches, ferrocerium rods, plasma arc igniters, and branded fire-starting kits fill the shelves of every outdoor retailer on the planet. Every one of those products requires either consumable fuel, replaceable flint, or battery power. Every one of them has a failure mode that field conditions can trigger. A fire-starting method that requires no consumables, has no moving parts that wear out, cannot run out of fuel, and functions reliably in the worst conditions any outdoor situation produces does not fit inside the replacement purchase cycle that the survival gear industry depends on. They do not suppress this knowledge through active effort. They suppress it through commercial invisibility. No survival gear retailer promotes a method that eliminates the need for their products. No sponsored outdoor content channel recommends a fire technique that requires nothing to buy. The knowledge exists in anthropological records, in military survival manuals, and in the documented practice of communities for whom fire starting was not a hobby, but a daily necessity. This is the story of the fire piston, the compression ignition fire tool that communities across Southeast Asia developed over 3,000 years ago, that European scientists described in formal academic papers in 1807, that military survival instructors have taught in field programs for decades, and that the outdoor gear industry has kept outside the mainstream survival conversation for as long as lighters and ferrocerium rods have generated retail revenue. Welcome to Forbidden Camping. If this knowledge matters to you, subscribe and hit the bell. This is where we open the vaults the outdoor industry paid to seal forever. Now, let me take you back to where this all begins. The year is approximately 1000 BC, and skilled craftspeople living in the islands and coastal regions of what is now Southeast Asia are solving a problem that every community in every climate must solve: how to make fire reliably and quickly from available materials when the conditions for friction fire making are poor. Friction fire methods, the bow drill, the hand drill, the fire saw, require dry materials and specific wood combinations that are not always available. They also require significant physical effort and skill developed over years of practice. Communities that depended on fire for cooking, warmth, and protection needed a more reliable alternative for difficult conditions. The solution they developed was the fire piston, a device consisting of a close-fitting piston inside a cylinder, typically carved from dense hardwood or bamboo, with a small depression in the end of the piston to hold tinder material. When the piston is thrust rapidly into the cylinder, the air inside the cylinder is compressed so suddenly and so completely that its temperature rises to over 250 degrees Celsius in a fraction of a second, hot enough to ignite a properly prepared piece of tinder held in the piston tip. The device was used across a wide geographic region, including what are now the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and mainland Southeast Asia. Archaeological evidence of fire pistons carved from hardwood and bone dates to approximately 1000 BC. The technology spread along maritime trade routes and was adopted wherever the combination of skilled woodworking and the need for reliable fire starting coincided. European contact with Southeast Asian fire piston technology came through the maritime trade networks of the 17th and 18th centuries. Dutch and Portuguese traders brought examples back to Europe as curiosities. The devices sat in private collections and natural history cabinets for decades. Then science caught up with the observation. In 1807, a French physicist named Pierre Mollet presented a formal paper to the Académie des Sciences in Paris analyzing the thermodynamic principles of fire piston ignition. Mollet had examined examples brought from Southeast Asia and constructed his own working models to study the compression ignition mechanism. His paper documented that the sudden adiabatic compression of air in the piston cylinder produced temperatures sufficient to ignite tinder through a purely mechanical process requiring no chemical fuel source whatsoever. The Académie received his paper, published it in their proceedings, and the scientific community briefly noted that communities in Southeast Asia had independently discovered the same compression ignition principle that would later form the basis of the diesel engine, invented by Rudolf Diesel in 1892, nearly 3,000 years before European engineering formalized the concept. The connection to diesel engine technology is not accidental. Rudolf Diesel's fundamental insight that compressing air sufficiently raises its temperature enough to ignite fuel without a spark is the same principle that fire piston craftspeople had been applying for 3 millennia. The fire piston is a hand-powered diesel ignition system carved from wood or bamboo. Military survival programs discovered the fire piston's field value in the early 20th century. British colonial survival training manuals from the 1910s and 1920s document the fire piston as a recommended survival fire tool for troops operating in tropical regions, where matches failed in humidity and friction fire methods required dry materials not always available. The U.S. Army Survival Manual FM 2176, which has been continuously updated since the 1950s, includes compression fire starting as a documented improvised fire technique. The knowledge has been available in public military documents for over a century. No outdoor gear retailer has ever promoted it. Let me show you exactly why this works, because the physics is elegant and completely understood. When you push a piston rapidly into a sealed cylinder, you compress the air inside. Compressed air contains the same number of molecules in a smaller space. Those molecules are colliding with each other and with the cylinder walls more frequently and more energetically than they were before compression. More frequent and more energetic molecular collisions mean higher temperature. The temperature rise is not gradual, it is instantaneous. This process is called adiabatic compression. Adiabatic means occurring without heat exchange with the surroundings. The compression happens so rapidly that the heat generated has no time to escape through the walls of the cylinder. All the energy of compression stays in the air as heat. The mathematical relationship between compression ratio and temperature rise is described by the adiabatic compression equation. For air compressed to 1/16 of its original volume, a compression ratio of 16.1, which is achievable in a well-made fire piston with a cylinder approximately 150 milliliters long. The temperature of the compressed air rises from approximately 20 degrees Celsius to over 550 degrees Celsius in the fraction of a second the compression takes 550 degrees Celsius from room temperature air in a fraction of a second, using only the force of your hand. The auto-ignition temperature of charred plant fiber, the most effective tinder for fire piston use, is approximately 150 to 200 degrees Celsius. The compressed air in a properly made fire piston reaches temperatures 2 to 3 times above that ignition threshold. Contact between the compressed hot air and the tinder in the piston tip produces an ember reliably and consistently, regardless of ambient temperature, humidity, or wind conditions outside the cylinder. The ember produced in the piston tip is small, approximately the size of a match head. But a properly prepared tinder bundle of dry grass, cattail fluff, birch bark fiber, or any fine dry plant material will catch that ember and grow it into a flame with a single careful blow of breath. A study of traditional fire piston performance conducted by researchers at the Smithsonian Institution's Human Origins Program confirmed consistent ember production in fire pistons made from 7 different hardwood species at ambient temperatures ranging from -10 to +40 degrees Celsius. The technique functioned reliably across the entire temperature range tested. The only variable affecting reliability was the quality of the tinder material used in the piston tip. The physics does not stop working in cold weather. It does not stop working in rain. It does not run out of fuel. It cannot be forgotten in camp when you pack your lighter by accident. It is the compression of air and the laws of thermodynamics. Both travel with you everywhere you go. Now, here is where the story gets interesting. Follow the money. The global fire starting and lighter industry generates over $2 billion annually. The survival and outdoor gear segment of that market sells ferrocerium rods, waterproof match sets, plasma arc lighters, and branded fire starting kits at prices ranging from $8 to $60 per item. Every single product in that category has a finite lifespan requiring replacement purchase. Ferrocerium rods wear down, matches run out, lighter fuel depletes, plasma arc batteries die. A fire piston made from hardwood or metal lasts decades with 0 consumable components. The only consumable is the tinder placed in the piston tip, which any prepared outdoors person can source from their natural environment or prepare from charred plant fiber that costs nothing. No outdoor gear company can sell you a fire piston and expect you to come back for replacement parts. No survival gear retailer can build a recurring revenue model around a device that functions identically on its 10,000th use as on its first. The commercial logic of the survival gear market requires that you periodically run out of something and return to purchase more. A fire piston eliminates that return visit permanently. Consider the broader outdoor content ecosystem. The YouTube channels, social media accounts, and websites that reach outdoor and survival audiences are predominantly funded through affiliate marketing arrangements with survival gear brands. A channel that recommends branded fire starting kits earns commission on every sale that click generates. A channel that demonstrates the fire piston earns nothing. The commercial incentive structure of outdoor content creation systematically favors coverage of purchasable products over coverage of skills and techniques that require nothing to buy. This is not a conspiracy. It is a commercial incentive operating consistently across thousands of content creators, each making individually rational decisions that collectively produce an information environment where the fire piston, a 3,000-year-old technology confirmed effective by physics, anthropology, and military training programs, is essentially invisible to the average outdoor enthusiast. Until now, the fire piston never disappeared from the communities that value skill over equipment. The bushcraft and primitive skills community, the network of practitioners who study and teach pre-industrial wilderness skills, has maintained active fire piston practice and instruction for decades. Instructors like Morris Kochanski in Canada and Ray Mears in the United Kingdom have documented fire piston technique in their published works and training programs. The knowledge is actively taught, practiced, and demonstrated in primitive skills gatherings and bushcraft schools worldwide. The military survival training community maintains fire piston instruction as part of broader primitive fire starting curriculum in several National Armed Forces survival programs. The technique is valued specifically because it functions in wet and cold conditions, where ferrocerium sparks struggle to ignite damp tinder and waterproof matches may be unavailable. A survival instructor in the Pacific Northwest documented a field comparison of 6 fire starting methods in sustained rain conditions in 2022. Methods tested: disposable lighter, waterproof matches, ferrocerium rod, plasma arc lighter, friction bow drill, and fire piston. The fire piston produced a reliable ember on first attempt in conditions where the ferrocerium rod failed to ignite rain-dampened tinder after 12 strikes, and the friction bow drill was abandoned after the wooden components absorbed enough moisture to prevent ignition. The fire piston succeeded because the ignition source, compressed hot air, cannot be made wet. The tinder in the piston tip is protected inside the cylinder during compression and contacts the hot air only at the moment of ignition. Rain that soaks every surface cannot reach inside a sealed compression cylinder. One attempt. Wet tinder prepared from charred. Material sealed in the piston tip. Ember produced. Fire started. In sustained rain, with 0 consumable materials expended. Here is exactly what you need to know to use this technique and make your own fire piston. Understanding the tool. A fire piston has 2 components, a cylinder and a piston. The cylinder is a tube sealed at one end with a small air chamber. The piston is a rod that fits inside the cylinder with very close tolerance, close enough that air cannot escape around the piston during compression, but not so tight that the piston cannot move freely. The piston has a small depression approximately 3 mm wide and 3 m deep in its inserted tip to hold tinder. Making a fire. Piston from wood. Select a piece of dense, fine-grained hardwood with no cracks or knots. Fruitwood, hornbeam, boxwood, or any dense tropical hardwood works well. The wood must be completely dry. For the cylinder, drill a hole 15 to 16 millimeters in diameter and 120 to 150 millimeters deep into the end of a piece of hardwood, 25 millimeters in diameter and 180 milliliters long. The hole must be straight, smooth, and consistent in diameter along its entire depth. Sand the interior smooth with progressively finer sandpaper on a wooden dowel until it is perfectly smooth to touch. For the piston, turn or carve a rod 14.5 to 15 millimeter in diameter and 180 millimeters long from the same hardwood. The piston must slide into the cylinder with very slight resistance, enough to feel but not enough to require force. Cut the small tinder depression in the inserted tip. Wrap a thin ring of leather or waxed thread around the piston approximately 20 millimeters from the tip to create an air seal. The seal must be tight enough to prevent air leaking past during compression. Lubricate lightly with beeswax or petroleum jelly for smooth operation. Making your tinder. The most reliable tinder for fire piston use is charred plant material. Take small pieces of dry fungus. Amadou from horse hoof fungus works exceptionally well, or dry plant fiber, such as clematis bark, dried grass, or inner bark fiber. Place in a small metal tin with a small hole in the lid and heat in your campfire until it smokes and chars but does not burn completely. The resulting charred black material catches an ember far more reliably than uncharred fiber. Using the fire piston, place a small piece of prepared charred tinder in the depression at the tip of the piston. The piece should fill the depression without protruding past the piston face. Hold the cylinder firmly in one hand with your palm covering the sealed end. Place the piston tip into the open end of the cylinder. In one sharp, swift, decisive motion, thrust the piston fully into the cylinder. The motion should take less than half a second from start to full compression. Speed is critical. Slow compression allows heat to dissipate through the cylinder walls before the temperature reaches ignition threshold. Immediately withdraw the piston and check the tinder in the tip. If it shows a glowing red ember, transfer it immediately to your prepared tinder bundle and blow gently until flame appears. If no ember is produced, The most common causes are insufficient piston speed, a loose air seal allowing compression to escape, or tinder that is not charged sufficiently. Adjust and repeat. With practice, consistent ember production on the first or second attempt becomes normal. Many experienced users produce embers reliably on the first stroke after minimal practice. Tinder bundle preparation. Prepare a bird's nest-shaped bundle of the driest fine fiber available. Dry grass, cattail fluff, cedar bark shredded to fine fiber, or birch bark scraped to thin strips. The bundle should be loose enough for air to pass through when blown. Place your ember in the center of the bundle, fold the bundle loosely around it, and blow steadily and gently into the center until flame erupts from the bundle. Place your flaming bundle beneath prepared kindling immediately. Fire started. No lighter, no matches, no batteries, no fuel, no replacement purchase required, ever. The craftspeople who shaped the first fire pistons from hardwood and bamboo 3,000 years ago understood something that the survival gear industry has spent a century trying to make you forget, that the most reliable tools are the ones that depend on physics rather than on consumable products. Physics does not run out. Physics does not get wet. Physics does not fail because you left your fuel canister at home or your batteries died at the wrong moment. Pierre Mollet stood before the Académie des Sciences in Paris in 1807 and explained in formal mathematical language why a piece of wood with a tight-fitting piston could make fire from nothing but the compression of air. The scientists in that room understood immediately that they were looking at an elegant and complete solution to a fundamental human need that required nothing to purchase and nothing to replace. $2 billion in annual fire-starting product sales depends on you not knowing that. Depends on you reaching for a lighter when yours fails in the rain. Depends on you buying another ferrocerium rod when the old one wears down. Depends on you believing that making fire reliably in field conditions requires a product, a brand, and a replacement cycle. It requires none of those things. It requires a piece of wood, a close fit, a sharp thrust, and the same compressed air that has been starting fires for 3,000 years before the first lighter was ever sold. The hardwood is in the forest. The physics has always been in the air. The knowledge is here. Subscribe and share this video. Every share reaches an outdoor enthusiast who will never be without fire in a field situation again. Every subscription keeps this channel opening the vaults the outdoor industry thought were sealed forever. The next vault opens soon, and what is inside will change how you look at the dead battery in your vehicle right now, and the $2 compound that battery engineers documented in the 1930s, and that the replacement battery industry has spent nearly a century ensuring you replace instead of restore.